Welcome everyone to Buddhist Center. So glad you could all join me today to look at Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment that we're so fortunate to be able to hear in our ears with this human basis. We have so much opportunity, and not only do we have the ability to hear these teachings in our ears, we've met with all of the causes and conditions to receive very qualified teachings in our ears that are concise, precise, and we know they aren't stained. And generally speaking, it's very easy to find stained, tarnished views that are incomplete, views where you still find grasping. But it's very, very rare to be presented with a complete path in the way that we have been, because of the kindness of Khyentse Geshe Wandak and His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and other great masters now participating with us, like Geshe Dorje Damdu and Umzala Geshe Aga and Geshe Mala Tenzin Ladrin. We are so fortunate. We have everything that we need from an ingredients perspective, and also those who can tell us how to cook those ingredients. So we have nothing missing whatsoever in terms of what we would need, or any human being would need, with a mental consciousness to be presented with and practice to be able to get rid of the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience. And every single sentient being will become a Buddha sooner or later. All sentient beings have Buddha nature. All sentient beings have this mental consciousness, just like we have, just like Buddha had before he became enlightened. That is in the nature of clear light and unsullied. And these stains that we currently possess and that the Buddha possessed previously are adventitious stains, and they're not in the nature of our mind. They're merely kind of saturated into it, but our mind can be distilled. All those impurities can be kind of boiled out of it or distilled out of it. And what's left is this mind that's unsullied and is in the nature of clear light. And if we pack that mind with this kind of incredible love and compassion, then it only will dependently originate into us becoming a reliable guide in the future, like a Buddha. When we couple the wisdom realizing emptiness with love and compassion that the bodhisattvas do, we will be able to achieve that same state of Buddhahood, because we possess this mind, we possess this kind of base that isn't this or that, is empty of inherent existence, just like the Buddha's mind is empty of inherent existence. And as we've said before, our mind is empty of inherent existence, but because of dependent origination, we have this experience of suffering. Because we have these contaminated causes, we have contaminated results. And these contaminated causes are necessarily in the nature of suffering. So our experience over and over and over again, because of emptiness, this is possible. Because from emptiness, from this lack of inherent existence of all phenomena, things dependently originate into this or that, and they depend upon a cause being concordant with a result. So we see that if we fill our minds that are in the nature of just knowing and being a reflector with that which is perfectly known and perfectly reflected, then if it's coupled with the perfect kind of mind of love and compassion, then we will be able to become a Buddha, just like Buddha Shakyamuni did, with the same exact process, going through the 5 paths, generating the mind that aspires to enlightenment at the path of accumulation, and then have a union of calm abiding and special insight at the path of preparation, generally speaking, and then at the path of seeing directly, perceiving the emptiness that has to be perceived in order for us to be liberated, and then the path of meditation, realizing that emptiness over and over and over again through the 10 bodhisattva grounds, to eventually not only get rid of the afflictive obstructions that the hearer and solitary realizer, practitioner in an abiding nirvana has gotten rid of, but also from the 8th, 9th, and 10th bodhisattva ground on, one is working on the obstructions to omniscience, which impede him or her from being a Buddha, from being a completely reliable, omniscient being. So we all have this potential. It all sounds very fancy with lots of fancy words, because we'll need to know what all of those things mean in order to achieve that resultant state of Buddhahood, the 11th ground, if you will. But in the meantime, what this is about is maturing our minds so that our minds participate in reality more and more like holy beings, and we participate in society more and more like bodhisattvas, so that eventually we will be able to independence upon the participation that we're doing in terms of our studies and so forth, and our participation in the kind of contrived ways that we're trying to help others. This will transform into actual bodhicitta and actual wisdom realizing emptiness. So before we go any further, let's get into the 7-point Vairocana posture that we've gotten into many times before. And before we do that, let me share a screen and let me say, Lai gedan ludan jinge drubun da dan mi genan dan drowa gunji dronan ji zamba dan je gedu da ji judendo. In the language of the gods, Nagas and Yaksas, in the language of demons and humans too, in however many kinds of speech there may be, I shall proclaim the Dharma in the language of all. And many of you have heard Geshe's, Rinpoche previously used to start teachings with this. He said it very fast in Tibetan, but this is what they say. This is what he would say, many Geshes say. And when we do this beginning practice, and we imagine eventually the merit field, and then we imagine all sentient beings, in order for all sentient beings to be helped, they have to be able to understand what is being said. So the teacher at the beginning of the teaching, he or she is visualizing all sentient beings that they're teaching to. I mean, this is what you're supposed to be doing. You're imagining, you, just as you as participants are imagining that you bring all sentient beings to the teaching in order for them to hear the truth of suchness. So you're thinking to yourself, you know, may they be able to hear this in their own individual languages. But the teacher is also visualizing, because you'll all become teachers eventually. The teacher is also visualizing all sentient beings and beginning the teaching by saying, oh, because now I've imagined all sentient beings here, may they be able to hear this truth of suchness that I'm presenting, because we know that the Buddhas don't wash away negativities with water, remove negativities with hands, transfer realizations. They teach the truth of suchness. So the teacher imagines that he or she is being able to teach the truth of suchness in a way that they'll all be able to understand in their own individual languages. But one thing that's special about a Buddha is that there is a simultaneous teaching to scope that can go on. So the Buddha is able to not only speak in the language of all these beings, but utter a word that would answer different questions and would answer it in their own individual languages and be able to help them purify whatever the next stain that needs purifying. So this is the point of doing this. We'll eventually become the most reliable guides in the universe and be able to do these things. So as a teacher who cannot certainly do anything like this, I'm trying to make an imprint in my mind to be able to do, you know, what a Buddha can do, because I know that results are concordant with the cause. So I know the more that I make my thinking, even if it's contrived like that of a bodhisattva or a Buddha, the more that my mind will be able to be malleable and be able to be kind of transformed into that big leap from this self-cherishing attitude to bodhicitta. So I'm making my mind more able, like a gold that's being burned. You know, you have, as they say, if you had a demon statue made of gold, and you didn't want to have a demon anymore, you could turn it into whatever you wanted, but you'd have to heat it up. So this is that process of heating it up to be able to transform this kind of attitude that we have into purity, into a better attitude of love and compassion, self-cherishing attitude into other cherishing attitude. And that transformation can take place because we are not in the nature of anger. We are not in the nature of self-cherishing. We can transform our mind from self-cherishing mind that it currently dependently originates into to other cherishing mind by creating the causes for the result of that other cherishing mind generation. And that's what we're trying to do. And that's why a teacher starts by saying this. And that's why we start by imagining the merit field and trying to gather the virtue that's necessary for us to really be able to hear this, connect with the beings that have really transmitted these teachings, but then also bringing all sentient beings here so that we're stamping in our minds this Mahayana motivation to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. So I was thinking about this morning when I was telling myself, don't forget to recite that prayer. I'm getting closer and closer to the beginning, if you notice. So that's progress, right? So I was telling myself, don't forget to recite this prayer. But then I started thinking of the meaning and the intent. And why do we recite this prayer? And I think that's what's important to talk about, how we put this into the practical application. And they aren't just words that are kind of reverberating and maybe sound nice. And they have a blessing. There's no question about that. But in understanding the meaning is just a different ballgame altogether, because then we can apply it to our lives. There we are. So let's get into the 7-point Vairocana posture that we've gotten into so many times before, that allow our channels and winds to be lined up, winds to flow nicely, blood to flow nicely, and it gets our mind, as it says in the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, and in Kamala Shila's text, and in Pabunka Rinpoche's Namdu Lajong, it gets our minds into a place of clarity, or a place at least, and this is another thing I wanted to make a point of, a place of clarity, or a place from which we can check if it is clear. Because we've made it says this in the text too, we've made our body support our mind's clarity to the best of our ability. So we've done this physical procedure of putting our legs into a position, our hands into a position, our spine into a stack of coins position, our shoulders into a position, our head slightly forward in a position, our eyes slightly open, kind of pointed at our nose in a position, our mouth and comfortably with our tongue against the roof of our mouth. We've done all of these things that the texts say will make our mind clear. So if you look at the 6 preparations, when you get into this 7-point Vairocana posture-esque position, it says when the instructions go on that now you've got there and you see, is my mind clear? And if there are things happening, there's antidotes that you apply right then and there, actually. And some of them may be getting up. So this is a very interesting point you would never think about. Okay, I've sat down, I've got into a 7-point Vairocana posture. You know, this is your daily meditation. This isn't something we just do Sundays. Your daily meditation. You sit down, you get into your 7-point Vairocana posture, or whatever posture you personally can get into that you find most conducive. There are many other postures. This is one. You get into this 7-point Vairocana posture, and you start to kind of see how your body feels. You kind of do a scan of how your body feels, how it all is, you know, if it's causing any kind of pain or distraction. And then once you've scanned that, you see, is my mind sleepy? Is my mind really busy? So really busy mind, we know focusing on the breath can help with that. But super sleepy mind at times, just telling it, wake up, wake up, wake up, with that introspection, catching it, and mindfulness, bringing it back, and, you know, over and over and over again, just might be a futile process. It might be something that's just not going to work. You're not going to wake up. You need to stand up. And Rinpoche always used to say, he gave these instructions. So I've been really trying to think of oral instructions lately that he specifically gave, and that you find in texts. So you're in that position. Do you push through it, or do you get up, wash your face, have a sip of cold water or tea? That's their, you know, the Tibetan go-to thing. Have some tea. Or look at the moon is another thing to clarify your mind. You know, just walk around, they say sometimes. Maybe that 30-second, 1-minute procedure that you do will make it so that you have a successful meditation in terms of abandoning both excitement and laxity, because maybe the getting up gets a little energy out that was making mind rides on the wind. You know, there's a physical mind-body connection. Sometimes if you get a little bit of kind of weird energy out, we'll call it that, you know what I mean? You'll be able to not be as distracted or scattered or excited in your meditation. And if you get up, you maybe can get rid of that kind of dullness or lethargy, because the point of meditation, we know, is as calm as the mind can get whilst being as clear as it can possibly get. And if the mind is scattered and going all over the place, we know that we could sit there and put some antidotes to it. And if those don't work, then we need to get up too and try again later. We shouldn't force ourselves to hate our meditation, because then tomorrow we won't want to do it. We should get up. We should just get up. It's not working. But then when we see, you know, that could be that's the exact solution to our ability to sit for 30 minutes undistracted without laxity or excitement. So this is just an important point to make, that when you do meditation, it's an active process where you're checking who you are, you're checking where you're at, and you're seeing what your mind's doing. And you're applying not only antidotes just to kind of tie yourself to your meditation cushion, you're applying practical antidotes that will allow you to then sit on your meditation cushion without feeling like you have to strap yourself down. So when you're applying too much mind, you know, having this introspection, just this mindfulness, catching the object way too much, that's so much distraction going on. You're setting a habituation in your mind of just being busy and just doing different busy things than you normally do. You're allowing your mind to play hopscotch, and then you familiarize yourself with that hopscotch. And that's bad. That's not what meditation is. That's not what you're trying to do sitting on the cushion. And so many times, if you try to keep pushing through it, your body and your mind will connect in a way, and it'll force you into a dullness that'll allow you to sit there for hours. And you'll think you're doing something really, really spectacular, but unfortunately, you'll be sitting in dullness. And many people have been stuck in a single pointed kind of blissy meditation, thinking that they had, arrived at a way to really fix the mind. But the mind was fixing on the object with so much dullness, it couldn't possibly create a union of calm abiding and special insight that would produce inferential valid cognition of emptiness. So always look out for pitfalls. That's the whole point of this teaching every single Sunday and Tuesday, is to be able to, okay, we have the Lamrim. We heard it for a long time. How does this work in our meditation? How do I apply this in my life? So that's enough about that. So what we do, we get into the 7-point Vairocana posture. We're not going to have time to, I'm not going to get up. I'm not going to tell you what's going on. But, normally if I was sitting at home and doing my practice, I would be really sure it was time to meditate. So we get in the 7-point Vairocana posture. We know that our focal object, when we're doing meditation, we have a focal object. Here we're doing fixed meditation, not analytical meditation. We will do some types of analytical kind of glancing meditation later, but here we're trying to fix our mind on a focal object, and we're telling our minds what to do. So here the focal object is breathing in and out and counting the breath. So we're doing cycles of breath, breathing in, breathing out, and counting. And we're not allowing our minds to do anything but that. In terms of the breathing, we're counting on the exhale. We're not counting on the inhale. If we see our mind starting to do something other than what we told it to do, we need to correct that. So that's the first part of it. So we're breathing in and out and counting, and then we're having in our mind, we're not trying to hallucinate with our eye consciousness. We're having our mental consciousness. Imagine a front generation form of Buddha Shakyamuni, beautiful and radiant, about the size of your thumb, arm length away, eye height, but static when you're doing fixed meditation, no movement or animation whatsoever. So you have this fixed image of Buddha Shakyamuni in the front generation, and then you have the breathing in and out and the counting of the breath. So focal object, we have these 4 things, and then what are kind of the things or obstacles that can come up in meditation? We know that we have excitement and distraction on one end, where our mind's going all over the place, and on the other end, we have kind of lethargy, dullness, sleepiness. neither of which we want. We don't want our mind busy. We don't want our mind dull. So we have what's called introspection. Mindfulness is telling your mind what to do and not forgetting the focal object. We're telling our mind, don't forget, breathing in and out, counting, and French generation form of Buddha Shakyamuni. And then our introspection is checking to see whether that is exactly what's going on, or there's some sort of scattering of our mind that isn't what we told to do going on, or some sort of sleepiness going on, or lack of clarity. And that's not what we told to do, because we told that we wanted to get as calm and as clear on the focal object as possible. We want to be able to have that image of Buddha Shakyamuni, even though it's not moving, be exactly as it was right in front of us, arm length away, thumb size, about eye height. We, in our minds, we'll get to the point where we can fix on that and have it completely be the only object of observation, and be not only calmed down enough to see it only, but also clear, and there won't be any kind of light deprivation. I mean, that's kind of what it is. It should be a bright object. Okay, so we'll start by doing that, breathing in and out, counting French generation form of Buddha Shakyamuni, and applying the antidotes. Spy in your mind saying, hey, there's distraction, there's lethargy, and then that's introspection, and then mindfulness, bringing back the focal object. We're so fortunate to be here today to hear the text, the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment by Lama Tsongkhapa that we were taught for so many years, that contains all the teachings of Buddha Shakyamuni, contains all the instructions of the Nalanda Pandits. We have a completely, perfectly pure path to follow. We should rejoice in this fact. Billions of people, billions of humans don't have a chance to even meet with this truth which will free us all from suffering, this truth which will allow us to all achieve bliss. We're so fortunate to have met with it now. We should take advantage of this opportunity. Now imagine that Buddha Shakyamuni goes from the fixed form into a completely animated form. Imagine Buddha Shakyamuni is smiling and so happy that we're here today, engaging in exactly what he intended for us to engage in, the stages of the path to Buddhahood. We know that Buddha Shakyamuni will always be emanating bodies in order to help sentient beings, until the word sentient being no longer exists and is only a memory. All beings will become Buddha. Imagine Buddha Shakyamuni is looking into our eyes, so happy that we're engaging in the Mahayana path. Now imagine that Buddha Shakyamuni's animation and the bliss that he's experienced from seeing that we're all engaging in this path explodes like fireworks into the entire merit field in the space in front of you. Imagine now that all the holy gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas are in the space in front of you. Imagining Khenser Geshe Wandak, we remember him so well, smiling, so happy. We're continuing these teachings, continuing exactly what he asked us to continue. We know how happy that would make him. We know how happy he was when we said, yes, let's start the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment over again. Imagine Khenser Rinpoche is right in the space in front of us. He's right there, just as you remember him, smiling, so connected to him. Imagining His Holiness the Dalai Lama. All of these teachings are possible. All of the Dharma spread throughout the world. This Tibetan Buddhism, the Nalanda tradition, spread throughout the world because of the kindness of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Imagine him seated there, on a very, very strong throne supported by 8 snow lions. Imagining Geshe Lobsang Gompo, Kenser Genjatso, imagining Dema Locha Rinpoche, imagining Geshe Dorje Damdu Umzala Geshe Aga, imagining Geshe Mala Tenzin Ladrin, Jeffrey Hopkins, Ani Tupten Chodron Shadow Rinpoche, all of these holy beings we've been so connected to, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, who's recently left our world, only in physical form though. We're so fortunate to have been connected to all of these beings that connect us to all of the beings that I will now mention. Now, imagine all the beings of the extensive deeds lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Lord Maitreya and Basu Bandhu, Asanga and Basu Bandhu and Dharmakirti and Dignaga and Vimukta Sena and Hari Bhadra and Shakyapprabha and Gunaprabha, imagining Lama Sulimpa and Atisha right there in the space in front of you. All the beings of the profound view lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Manjushri and Arya Nagarjuna and Buddha Palita and Arya Deva, and Chandra Kirti and Shanti Deva and Chandra Rashita and Baba Vega, Kamala Shila, imagining all these beings in the space in front of you. We're so connected to them. We understand just a little tiny bit about grounds and paths and the Vinaya and ethics and logic and reasoning and the emptiness of inherent existence because of these two very blessed, profound lineages. We understand how to achieve the mind that aspires to enlightenment through the 7-point cause and effect instruction through generating the mind that aspires to enlightenment and the equalizing and exchanging self with others practice. Because of these holy lineages, because of the connections we've had to these kind lamas, we have all the causes and conditions possibly needed in our lives right now to become a Buddha. And all it takes is for us to engage in the path because we're so connected to these pure lineages where the instructions are exactly as they should be. Now we imagine the beings of the lineage of blessings passed down from Vajradhara and Saraha and Machipa and Talopa and Naropa and Losao Marpa and Milarepa and imagining Gampopa, all these holy beings who've been able to show us the nature of our mind, to look into the nature of the mind of clear light, exactly how to do that. We're so fortunate to understand the preliminaries necessary to do so and the preliminaries that lead to that incredible understanding of the Great Seal Mahamudra. Imagine now that Atisha, who we see in both lineages was Salimpa, and both in the extensive deeds and profound view lineages, passing down the Lamrim tradition to Drone Tompa, who's a lay person. Remember that. Always remember the Lamrim lineage is passed down through Drone Tompa. And we're so fortunate to be able to have access to this tradition, and we have no excuses. We can't say, oh, we're lay people. We can't engage in these practices when we know Atisha relied on a lay person to transmit the Lamrim lineage to. We imagine all of the old Kadampa lineages, the 3 Kadampa lineages. Imagine the holy beings of the Nyingmas, Padmasambhava, Sakya Konga Nyingpo, and Sakya Pandita. Imagining the Kaji lineage, the Karmapas, and the Galupa lineage, Lama Tsongkhapa, Kirtubje, Jelsubje, Pensen Shonandrapa, Basu Chuji Jetson, Jayan Sheba, Gonchu Jimmy Wambo, Janja Rupi Dorje, the 7th Dalai Lama, imagining all these holy beings, Jitsumba, Pubajok, all these incredibly holy beings, imagining them in the space in front of you. We're so fortunate to be able to understand what Buddha Shakyamuni's intent was because of these beings. We're connected to them like they are our spiritual family. We will become a Buddha in dependence upon the words that they've whispered from one teacher's mouth to one student's ear, all the way to us. We're so fortunate. We're connected in that way, in that intimate way with all of these holy beings. Imagining the beings of the highest yoga tantra, action tantra, performance tantra, and action tantra, all the 35 Buddhas, all of the protector deities, imagining them all in the space in front of you. Now we have all of these Buddhas in the space in front of us who have come and will come to this world in order for us to get rid of the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience. And not just for us individually, they've come to the world in order to do that for every single sentient being. Imagining these beings who have kind of motivations like that, who have perfect wisdom, perfect compassion, perfect skillful means, and perfect fat power, imagining them in the space in front of you, how much help we can receive from them. And even though we can't see them right now, it's said that whenever we call the Buddhas, they come because of their omniscience and love and compassion. It's just whether or not we have the karma to see them. So let's just imagine that curtain of our karma has been lifted and we actually see these beings in the space in front of us. This is how we're imagining. We're imagining it not like it's on TV, or not like it's just, some kind of memory, or some kind of, thing we're making up. We're imagining that these beings are here right now. Now we know that we want to achieve two specific things: complete freedom from suffering, and we want to achieve the most happiness we can possibly have. Likewise, all sentient beings want this same thing. All sentient beings, if asked in their own individual languages, how much, freedom from suffering would you want? They would say, I don't want any suffering. I want 100% freedom from suffering. And how much happiness would you want? I want 100% happiness. And the only way that you can achieve 100% happiness and 100% freedom from suffering is to become a Buddha. It's the only being that is not a sentient being. And if one is a sentient being, they haven't completed all of their aims, let alone all sentient beings' aims, until they're a completely reliable guide of a Buddha and have gotten rid of the afflictive obstructions and obstructions to omniscience. So if we want for ourselves to be able to have all of our needs fulfilled in a complete manner and perfected, we have to become a Buddha. And in order to make that happen, we have to rely upon other sentient beings and learn to see them as equally important, and eventually put their needs before our own, because we recognize that the most intense form of happiness or bliss that we have, even in our kind of conventional lives, is when we have an intense amount of love and kind of altruistic feeling towards someone. Even if it's for a moment or two, there's a bliss that's experienced that the Buddha is able to experience all the time, because he or she has experienced it in relation to every sentient being and not just in relation to one. So we recognize that our building of the complete freedom from suffering, and our building of the, getting rid of the obstructions to omniscience, and our, which will allow us to achieve complete bliss, will rely upon what I said before, creating causes and conditions that ripen into that state. And we know that in order to abandon that which keeps us from that state, we have to engage in a path. We have to engage in things and make progress on that path. So now, one of the things that we can do is imagine that we already are like these Buddhas. We already are able to teach the truth of suchness to all sentient beings in their own individual liberations. We already know where all sentient beings are. Now, going back to reality, I don't know where most sentient beings are because I have these obstacles and because I haven't gone through the Bodhisattva path. But the way I will eventually know where all sentient beings are is to imagine, and then be able to know where a little more of them are, and a little more of them are, and to love a little more and more of them without bias. So this procedure that we're about to do is to try to saturate our minds with a contrived kind of intention that will transform into what will actually be the way our mind operates, and will actually be able to be carried out by us. It's not just a fantasy at that point. So now we imagine that all sentient beings are brought here. We lead all sentient beings here to be able to hear the truth of suchness in their individual in their individual liberations, in individual languages. Excuse me. We imagine we bring all the hell-hungry ghost and animal beings here, all the human demigods and gods. I know some of the descriptions may seem like, oh, I can't imagine that to be true. But hundreds of years ago, who could imagine if they were living in Maine that there were fluorescent animals in a rainforest? So there's so many things that our small minds maybe just don't know yet. So we imagine that we bring all of these beings here, even if they're beings we're not sure are really true, because the Buddha said they are, and we're trying to create this connection with all beings. And now we're imagining we've led them here to hear the truth of suchness, because this teaching is on the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment, which contains all of the stages of the path necessary to become a Buddha. We see the teachings shared in common with beings of small, medium, and great capacity that contain everything that Lord Buddha ever taught. We're teaching everything that Lord Buddha ever taught, so all sentient beings can be led here and be benefited by it. So we're thinking in these terms. So we imagine that all sentient beings are here and all non-sentient beings here. So all the Buddhas are here, which are not sentient beings, and all sentient beings are here. Even 10th level bodhisattvas are sentient beings. Anyone who has afflictive obstructions or obstructions to omniscience is here and hearing exactly what they need to hear in order to purify themselves of whatever abandonment they need to purify on the particular stage they're on to move to the next stage. So with that, before we recite the Heart Sutra, I just want to read a small part from Meditation on Emptiness by Jeffrey Hopkins, because I feel that as we do this more and more, we'll be able to understand what the Heart Sutra means. It's very easy to read the Heart Sutra, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, etc. But to know what that no, what is the object of negation? What is being said by Lord Buddha? According to Arya Nagarjuna and the great masters, the second turning of the wheel of Dharma is the definitive teaching. This is, and the other teachings require interpretation. So what is the Buddha being so definitive about here? And if we don't know that, if we don't know what the object of negation is, and we take away too much or too little, we're still grasping. And as it says, and if there's attachment to this life, we're not a spiritual practitioner. If there's attachment to samsara, we have no renunciation. If there's attachment to our own self-interest, we have no bodhicitta. And if there is grasping, you do not have the view by the Sacha Konga Nimpo. And if there's any kind of taking away too much or taking away too little, you don't have the view. So the object of negation, the understanding of what the no means, is the whole key to our being able to be free from cyclic existence and our whole key to being able to become Buddhas. So here we'll just read a little bit. This is a tough book for everyone. The sources of it are Jayan Sheba's Great Exposition of Tenets, Kensho Laketon's oral teachings, who was Dalai Lama's emptiness teacher, Janja's presentation of tenets, the fifth Dalai Lama's words, sacred words of Manjushri, Kirchup J's manual of instructions in the view, and Ling Rinpoche's oral teachings. So when we read the Heart Sutra, someone think about this. In order for Jeffrey Hopkins, who's like a computer of Dharma, to really feel, he needed, he could explain the Heart Sutra. It took all that to be able to arrive at what I'm about to read. So never be satisfied with partial instructions, as Lama Tsongkhapa said. And we can see the result in Jeffrey Hopkins of someone who wasn't satisfied with partial instructions nearing, the end of a life, and seeing how just affected by the view of emptiness he's been. First stage of meditation on emptiness. So this is now in the third chapter it's called Meditation, Identifying Self. So just a couple pages and then we'll read the Heart Sutra. How a beginner develops experience with respect to the view of emptiness. Okay. And then it'll get really hard. It'll say how a beginner would do it. And then it'll be like, what are you talking about? So it just goes to show the scope levels. During the first stage, a yogi gains an initial familiarity with the meaning of emptiness through one of several reasonings. He or she proceeds through three basic essentials in meditation: identifying the object negated in the view of selflessness, ascertaining that selflessness follows from the reason, and establishing the reason's presence in the subject. Okay, so all phenomena are empty of inherent existence because they dependently originate. All phenomena dependently originate is basically what that's saying. So you see the reason, which is Chuchen Sewa Dak, that you have subject, thesis, or predicate or something. No, they say something else. Subject, thesis, reason, or sign. And here that's what that means, basically. And establishing the reason's presence in the subject. So you say it's dependently originates. So is the subject all phenomena dependently originate? Yes. Okay, so the reason is in the subject. So you're saying that it's empty because it dependently originates. So that's what it's basically saying. The initial object of meditation is the selflessness of the person. The reasoning used is the sevenfold reasoning as set forth by Chandrakirti. Identifying the object negated in the theory of selflessness. First, one concentrates and clears one's mind sitting quietly. Okay, so we talked about that, right? So you have to see if you're there. Okay, are you there? You know, are you in a place where this is going on? Now, you try to create the I. So where's the I? Terry, you just found it. Okay, so you sit in this place and you identify the I, okay? With a subtle type of consciousness, one watches the appearance. It says, if it does not, an appearance of it is created by thinking I with a subtle type of consciousness, one watches the appearance. Okay, so I have this I. How does the I appear to me? Objectively real. It appears like it's in, you know, it's there, it's truly existent, it's inherently existent. So you concretize it so you can tear it down, basically. We talked about this. You have to figure out your object of negation, set it up, and then beat it down. So this is what you do. So if the consciousness that watches the appearance is too strong, one will not see the I, or it will appear and disappear quickly. So it's kind of like, it's not a tight, you know, because then it's like too tight. You're just trying to see how it would naturally appear. I, the natural I appears. How is it appearing to me? Is it appearing as something that isn't truly existent? Or is it appearing very concrete and solid and real? How is it appearing to me? It says, therefore, one should allow the consciousness conceiving I to be generated continuously. And through watching this I as if from a corner, one will gain a firm sense of it. So it's strange. Meditating on emptiness starts with meditating on selfhood. Meditating on selflessness starts by meditating on selfhood, identifying the target that you're shooting at. You're saying, oh, this thing appears objectively real, intrinsically existent, inherently existent, truly existent. This I, it's just appearing to my mind in this way. Is it true or not? And then the investigation can begin once you establish the object of negation, which is an objectively existent I. So is that making sense? So you have to establish what you're trying to tear down in order to tear it down, in order to know that you're really tearing the right thing down, not the wrong thing down. And you're not saying, oh, well, I don't think this thing exists. You're trying to see its mode of existence and how it exists conventionally and ultimately. So one would also imagine that one is being accused, even falsely. So I did a little version of that and watch the sense of I. One could remember an incident of false accusation during which one thought, I didn't do this. I'm being wrongly accused. By watching this, I, who is accused, a firm sense of the way that the non-analytical intellect apprehends I can be ascertained. So you don't have to think about, oh, who's the I? It's Jeff's this thing. There's no analysis needed. It just arises. So it's a non-analytical I that arises. You aren't trying to come up with it. It just, you're accused. There it is. So it doesn't require, you know, kind of deep undoing of it, though, is the other story. Because it's so naturally present, we have these artificial and natural things that are present, or acquired and natural things that are present that are obstructing us. It's just arises like that, you know? So we have to say to ourselves, okay, how is this arising? How is this appearing naturally? You know, how is this coming up? And sitting and watching it without analysis is how you establish your object of negation. Because it seems like it's appearing as objectively existent. And all of reality, obviously, all the things other than the self of a person appear that way too, obviously. And that they all appear that way even to 10th ground bodhisattvas when they're dealing with conventional existence. Because the Buddha is the only one who doesn't have the appearance, you know, these false appearances that occur. So we have to figure out what the false appearance is in order to kind of untangle it. This is the last paragraph I'm going to read, and then we'll just read the Heart Sutra. So I just want to give everybody a taste of meditating on emptiness. Isn't just like, oh, there's nothing, here I am, space. It's not that. It's really a process of establishing an object of observation, analyzing it from every single way to see if it could exist the way it appears to exist, and the way I apprehend it as existing. I deceptively apprehend all of it as having inherent existence if we look at it truly the way things occur, even at a sensory level. So if the memory of such an accusation is not strong, a yogi cultivates it until the sense of I, as misconceived by the innate non-analytical intellect, is obvious. This innate mind does not analyze whether the I is the same as or different from the mind and body. Without any reasoning and through the force of habituation, conceives of an I that is as if it's self-efficient, able to establish itself, naturally, inherently existent from the very start, and fused with the appearance of mind and body. So you're not trying to say, is it the mind, is it the body? You're just seeing it as, this is me. This, what comes up? Does it feel like, oh, well, Jeff's just mine? No, it feels like this is all Jeff. So this sense of I that just kind of arises. And then you can kind of say, well, what is that? What are you talking about, Jeff? When you're thinking this way naturally, then you can start the analysis once you establish the problem you're having and how naturally it occurs. And that's why it's so hard to understand emptiness and do anything with emptiness, because everything around you tells you that it's not true. Everything out there, it's just not true. So the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge, as we know, the explicit meaning is the emptiness of inherent existence of all phenomena, emptiness of intrinsic existence, objective existence of all phenomena. And so explicitly, I think I said explicitly, that's the teaching. And then implicitly, the teaching on the 5 paths, path of accumulation, preparation, seeing, meditation, and no more learning. So as we think about the Heart Sutra, we think about how close are we to this understanding of appearances don't match with reality. How close are we to the first gate of the path of accumulation, the second gate of the path of preparation, the paragate at the path of seeing, parasamgate at the path of preparation, and bodhisoha at the path of no more learning. We ask ourselves, where are we at in that process? And do we understand that we are empty of inherent existence? The path is empty of inherent existence. Sentient beings are empty of inherent existence. The Buddha is empty of inherent existence, while still being able to want to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings, and recognizing that through mere imputation on a basis of designation, that things exist conventionally, but ultimately there's no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, etc. Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard. Once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha of monks and a great gathering of the Sangha of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. At the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice profound Prajaparamita? Addressed in this way, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice a profound Prajaparamita, should see in this way. Seeing the 5 skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness. Emptiness also is form. Emptiness is no other than form. Form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics. There is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity. There is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no eye, dhatu, no mind, dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind, consciousness, dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance, up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of Prajaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear, they transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the 3 times by means of Prajaparamita fully awaken to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra of Prajaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering, should be known as true, since there is no deception. The Prajaparamita mantra is said in this way: Teata om gate gate paragate parasangati bodhisoha. 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 Yet Om Gati Gati Paragati Parasangati Bodhisattva, thus Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasapa, should train the profound Prajaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasapa, saying, Good, good, O son of noble family, thus it is, O son of noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound Prajaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasapa, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. I prostrate to the gatherings of the Dakinis and the three chakras who abide in the holy yoga of using space by your powers of clairvoyance and magical emanation. Look after practitioners like a mother looks after her child. Kala jube nejo nama nengaje de jengai do do jendru baba lama yibu jinzi nezunan rozon la jazelo agasamara jazanda razamara be agasamara jazanda razamara. By the truth of the existence of the three jewels, may all inner and outer hindrances and adversities be overcome. May they become non-existent. May they be pacified. May they be completely pacified. May all negative forces opposed to the Dharma be completely pacified. May the host of 80,000 obstacles be pacified. May we be separated from all adverse conditions to the Dharma, and may we obtain all circumstances conducive to the Dharma. May there be auspiciousness, happiness, and well-being here right now. I make a mandala offering, imagining a perfect universe, offering to the Buddhas. Beautiful, beautiful world. Everyone's happy in it. Everyone's practicing, doing everything. Just imagine we're making this offering, because we know the offering of practice is really what the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas want, that kind of offering. And that was the offering that Milarepa could make. And that was the most precious offering that Marpa could ever ask for. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sanye jadan zaje janan la janje badu dagi jazuji dagi jije jibe zonanje drola benje zanje jubarjo. Sanye jadan zaje janan la janje badu dagi jazuji dagi jije jibe zonanje drola benje zanje jubarjo. Zanje jadan zaje janan la janje badu dagi jazuji Dagi jije jibe zonanje drola benje zanye drubarjo. And from Nagarjuna's Mulya Madhyamika Karika, the closing verse is, enthused by great compassion, you taught the immaculate Dharma to dispel all perverted views. To you, the Buddha Gautama, I pay homage. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining. I see like all over the world on the Facebook. So hello, and I know various countries. So good to see all of you. Today we're looking at Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment. As many of you know, we looked at this text for a decade with Khenser Geshe Wandak, and he used the four interwoven annotations or commentaries about the difficult points to help us to understand it. And although at the time, my language skills really couldn't meet up with those four annotations, now I'm, as a result of Khenser Geshe Wandak's kindness, able to go back because it's all on tape and go back because some of these things now are even translated in English that were not there at the time, and kind of see where I can fill in the gaps of my learning. And as I do so, as I find things, from working with, other teachers that are able to help me understand, some of the finer details that only Geshe Larampas really get. I'll share those details, however much of them I can pluck out more with you. And that's what I, hope to be able to share, and then hope to be able to share with you how to apply these teachings into your life and make them not just stacks of information in the mind. See how the Buddha never said something that wasn't an instruction to practice in some way, to see how all of these things, when your mind starts to be absorbed with them, begin to work to turn you 180 degrees from, perfection to imperfection to perfection. But this kind of turn is a very slow turn that takes place. But we have the shot to take this turn because we have these flawless instructions. So let's go right to the part where we were last time. So we've gone through the section on the greatness of the author, learning about Atisha and learning about all the Nalanda Pandits and the trailblazers of the extensive deeds and profound view lineage and leading back to Buddha Shakyamuni. So the greatness of the author, greatness of the teaching, how to listen to and explain the instructions, and then how to lead students through the actual instructions. So we're at the fourth category. When we divide the Lamrim Chemo, we're at the fourth one, but that's pretty much the whole book. So we're at the fourth one, and we've gone through, of course, the teaching shared in common with beings of small capacity, and learned, as Rinpoche would always say, that if we engage in the ethics that abandons the 10 non-virtuous activities and go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and then acknowledge our downfalls, if we engage in negativity, then we will be able to be free from the lower realms of cyclic existence. And we find this kind of idea in the teaching shared in common with beings of small capacity, where we learned about relying on a teacher, and then the human life of leisure and opportunity and death and impermanence, and reflecting on future lives and refuge and karma and its results, and opponent powers and so forth. So we went through that very thoroughly again, and we will hopefully, if we're all alive to do it, go through it again and again and again and again. Because I find even the most basic material, or what I thought was the most basic material, brings something out in my life that I never saw it could before, or helps me to control my mind and my life differently than I ever saw how it could. And that's the blessing that's within the Lamrim, that it's something that the more and more we read it, the more and more it matures our mind. So we finished this section on how to get out of the lower realms of hell, hungry, ghost, and animal, and how to abandon attachment for this life. And as Sachikonga Nipo says, if there's attachment to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. So we learned how to become a spiritual practitioner. And Lord Atisha, Drontompa, they say the same thing. A spiritual practitioner kind of throws away this life in terms of attachment. And we talked about how that doesn't make you participate less, and makes you participate more. It doesn't make you not be able to be a good mother, father, brother, sister, cousin, roommate. It makes you a better one, a more realistic one. So it shows how, if this attachment to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. You hear this and think, well, I love my family. Well, if you have attachment to this life, you can't love them in a way that is the most realistic way. So this is what it's talking about. So we learned how it even is helpful in this life to practice in this way if you want to participate well in this life. So then the medium scope is how to get out of cyclic existence altogether. We learned about what is renunciation, a desire to definitely emerge from cyclic existence, as Lama Tsongkhapa says in the Three Principled Paths, is day and night. It doesn't go away. Seeking this transcendent liberation because of a reflection on the downfalls of cyclic existence. So now we're in the downfalls of cyclic existence section, and we've gone through birth. So when we get into that, we have 8 sufferings, 6 sufferings, 3 sufferings, and we've already gone through the first 7 of the 8 types of suffering. So we went through birth, aging, sickness, death, meeting with the unpleasant, separating from the pleasant, and not getting what you want. And now we're arriving at the suffering of the appropriated aggregates. And I remember last week, I actually just stopped here. I was going to try to quickly read through all of it, but I felt that it was just a separate section in terms of difficulty of understanding, or just in terms of reflection and meditation. that I thought that it could take, this whole class, even if we only read it, because I know we're, getting closer and closer to time. But, Dungya Jaya Sampa, for anyone who's listening in Tibetan. I know someone on who is, just on one of Rinpoche's close, almost like relatives. So, so we're looking at Dungya Jaya Sampa, Demaje, Nepa Jon. So we're looking at this right now, and Lama Tsongkhapa's Lanrim Chemo, and we're in the Jipo Din Dang. Tumo Lanji Rimba is where we are. If you're looking at the Sache, we're in the Jipo Din Dang Tumo Lanji Rimba, and now we're in the Demaje Lobjung She, then Nepa Jon Lobjung She, then Nepa Jon Garishene Nepa Jon, then Dungya Jalan Sampa, Dungya Drulan Sampa, Dungya Sun Sampa. Then the Lamrim Chemo de Kangari Yure. Okay. So now we're on the Dungya Jepa lesson. So now we're on the 8th type of suffering. Nielen Sache Nielenji Pumbo, Dungya Jepa. Okay. The suffering of the 5 appropriated aggregates. This is very strange. I'll share this something else with you all privately later. The Buddha said, in brief, the 5 appropriated aggregates are suffering. Reflection on the meaning of this teaching, again, takes in 5 points. It is the nature of the 5 aggregates appropriated by karma and afflictions to be vessels of future suffering, vessels for suffering based on what presently exists, vessels for the suffering of pain, vessels for the suffering of change, and vessels for the suffering of conditionality. Reflect on these again and again and again. The Yanje Sanlodan, the Dungya, the Ngatsu, the Dungya Den, the Jema Ngatsu Dungya Yugare, the Tanda Ngatsu Dungya Yure, the Ngatsu Dungya, Ju Dungya, Chapa Duje Dungya, Den Yure, the Yanje Sanlodan. So we think about this again and again, that we're vessels for suffering. We're vessels for suffering based on now. We're vessels for suffering of change, of suffering or pain, vessels for the suffering of change, and vessels for suffering of conditionality. So we're these vessels right now for all of these things that will occur. Why? Because we have contaminated vessels. If the causes are contaminated, the results are contaminated. All composite things are impermanent. All contaminated things are in the nature of suffering. So we see all composite things are impermanent. Things that are impermanent rely on causes and conditions. If the roots are poisonous, the branches and the leaves are poisonous. So in terms of composite things, if the causes are bad, the result is bad. If the cause is contaminated, the result is contaminated. If it's contaminated, then it's necessarily suffering. So we see all contaminated things are in the nature of suffering. So we see how this occurs, and then how the only thing to get rid of the contamination is the wisdom realizing emptiness. All phenomena are the nature of emptiness, and selflessness, nirvana is peace. So we think about this. We have these contaminated aggregates, and we have, a dog who insists on sitting here. And we have all of these things that occur because the cause that brought about these appropriated aggregates what were the causes? Contaminated karmas, the afflictions in their seeds. And we know that Nagarjuna says that from the self-grasping ignorance arises inappropriate attention, an exaggeration of things as being pleasant, unpleasant. We exaggerate things as having this nature. And then the afflictions arise, then contaminated karmas arise. And these contaminated karmas or actions give rise to concordant results. So if they're contaminated, they give rise to contamination. And if you don't have the wisdom realizing emptiness, then it's contaminated. So if it's not the wisdom realizing ultimate truth, it's contaminated. So we see that what we're normally doing isn't the wisdom realizing ultimate truth. Therefore, we're always giving rise to causes for future contaminated basis that has all these things that stink about it. So this is what we're thinking about in this 8th type of suffering. You can see why I stopped here. So we're reflecting on this again and again, that here, with regard to this point, you induce suffering in future lives by taking upon these appropriated aggregates. As for the second, the appropriated aggregates form the basis for states such as illness and old age. that are grounded in the already existing aggregates. The third and fourth come about because the appropriated aggregates are linked with dysfunctional tendencies towards these two types of suffering. As regards to the fifth, the very existence of the appropriated aggregates constitutes the nature of the suffering of conditionality, because all of the compositional factors which depend on previous karma and afflictions are the suffering of conditionality. This will be explained in detail in the section on the three sufferings. So a lot of this stuff will get more details, and also the 12 links of dependent origination will become more clear on how these contaminated appropriated aggregates, appropriated meaning contaminated, appropriated aggregates come about exactly, when we look at the 12 links. If you do not cultivate a genuine sense of disenchantment with cyclic existence, the nature of which is the appropriated aggregates, you will have no chance to develop a genuine mind intent on liberation. So we're forced again and again, the pervasive compounded suffering, forced again and again into a set of contaminated aggregates. That's the pervasive compounded suffering, the mastermind, forcing us into the potential to have the suffering of change and the pervasive compounded suffering. And it's led by self-grasping ignorance. So the self-grasping ignorance, which we see is the origin of everything suffering-wise, drives this train towards all of these other potential sufferings. You'll have no chance, if you don't meditate on this, you'll have no chance to develop real renunciation, and there'll be no way for you to develop great compassion for living beings wandering in cyclic existence. As we've said before, this meditation on the 8 sufferings, 6 sufferings, and 3 sufferings may seem mundane, but if you don't develop a true disgust, repulsion with each of these 8, 6, and 3, then how could you possibly start to think about how to bring all sentient beings out of all of the things that they should be repulsed by? Because we don't even know we should be repulsed by some of this stuff. And until we really, really know our true predicament, we won't do anything day and night about it. We won't believe it enough. It'll sound good. It'll sound like the Buddha said some good things that we can apply to our life, and leave it at that. But if we meditate thoroughly on the 8, 6, and 3 types of suffering, and we understand the mastermind of the pervasive compounded suffering that's throwing us into, beyond our control, appropriated aggregates among the 5, sometimes it's 4, throwing us over and over and over into it again. And we have no control over that at this point. We have no freedom right now because we have this self-grasping ignorance. We haven't applied the antidote to stop it. And lack of freedom, the Buddha said, is our misery, is our suffering. We have no freedom right now. We're just thrust. I die. Now my mind is ejected from this body and goes wherever my mind's more familiar with and catches something like that, and then goes somewhere else beyond my control. If I'm not a practitioner that's ready for that, ready to dissolve elements, ready to know exactly what to do. We have a big storm coming, and when Rinpoche was out, I think it was in Seattle. I want to actually ask Roy. The tornado did come, and Roy panicked. Roy tells this story, so it's fine. Roy panicked, and Rinpoche was very, not being silly about it, like, laughing, but he was, being serious. And Roy said he'd never heard him be so stern. Roy was like, Rinpoche, we got to move. We got to get out of here. We got to do this. And Rinpoche said, Roy, sit down. Like, you can't imagine, but this is apparently what happened. Go for refuge. That's the only thing, if everything is destroyed, that's going to help you. And then Rinpoche went into some maybe Palden Lama or rituals and stuff. But yeah, I never forgot that there was imminent threat. And he just said, sit down, stop. If we're going to die, there's nothing you can do. And if you're going to die, you better be going for refuge. You better have your mind going for refuge to the Buddha and saying, I want to wake up. How do I wake up? Where can I go next to wake up? I want to have the realization of the cessation of suffering and the true Arya paths in my mind. How can I get to that next? I want to be an Arya. I want to be Sangha. I want to have the Dharma in my mind. I want to be Sangha. I want to be an Arya being. That's what going for refuge is. It's going for refuge to what you will become. So Rinpoche said, sit down, go for refuge, shoot your mind towards where you want it to go if we're going to die. And how many of us are going to do that without Rinpoche standing there going, sit down? Maybe now we will. And this is what this is all about, right? Okay. Hence, this reflection is extremely important. So it's saying you're never going to really have real compassion. You'll have biased compassion. You'll never really understand how bad it is because you haven't understood it for yourself. So you won't really see, like your enemy over there as having such a really hard time. That's so gross and disgusting that you just can't even like see the enemy for a second. You just see like, poor thing. That's how the compassion would really work and start to overpower bias, because you would know how bad it is. And you'd know that they're kind of out of control, under the grips, led by the nose, it says, by the self-grasping ignorance. And their actions are out of control, just like yours are and will be. Do you want yours to be out of control like theirs? Then react and be angry. So here it starts to allow us to be more realistic and have more compassion and be able to, bring the thing down to a level of realism and then generate compassion for it. Say, oh, this person's out of control. This person's suffering like me. Oh, I wish they weren't. They're just as important as I am. Hence, this reflection is extremely important regardless of which vehicle, Mahayana or Hinayana, you enter. Even when you have developed a sense of disenchantment with cyclic existence, follow flawless scriptures and authoritative commentaries and seek an exact understanding of them. Then use prolonged and discerned analytical meditation to bring about a powerful transformation of your mind. So the powerful transformation they're talking about is the path of accumulation for a year. Solitary realizer, renunciation. This stuff's supposed to make you get renunciation. This is the stuff you're supposed to take, the medicine, and it makes you get renunciation. And renunciation is what you have to get bodhicitta. A desire to emerge for yourself serves as a foundation. It's right in Nankapel's text, mind training like the rays of the sun. Go pick it up. Without this renunciation brought about by this stuff, you cannot get bodhicitta. This has to be there. You have to have renunciation day and night, wanting to get a cyclic existence yourself before real bodhicitta happens. Anything else is just something that maybe is good. It's nice to be nice, but it's not the nicest. Then use prolonged. Thus, I have followed the well-explained presentation of the noble Asanga. There's one of the cast of characters in our merit field, just pointing it out, how many of these beings we're so connected to, and explaining the Bhagavan's purpose in teaching the 8 types of suffering as a way to understand the truth of suffering, the faults of cyclic existence. Ottawa said, as soon as we are reborn as one of the 6 types of beings, we are faced with the sufferings of sickness, death, and so forth. When the cause of sickness is present, we're sick. When the cause of death is present, we die. This is neither inappropriate nor accidental. It is the character or nature of cyclic existence. While we are in cyclic existence, there's no escaping it. If we are disgusted by it, then we must eliminate the process of birth. To do this, we must eliminate its cause. Reflect in this way on arising of the sufferings explained above, the sufferings of birth, old age, illness, death, and so forth. So that concludes the chapter on the 8 types of suffering. And I think it's a good time to actually close today, because I think I can see the time over here is right around that. So we finish Dungyal Jail and Samba Tsar. So now we have Dungyal Dup, the Zanima, the Dundachi Jema, La, Matsu Jail, the Dungyal Dulan Samba. Okay, so next week we'll do the 6 types of suffering. And we'll go over that. But yeah, I just want to say thank you, everybody, for listening. And sorry, I was shifting back and forth with some Tibetan, but I thought it would be appropriate and wonderful, actually, to be able to do that. So we'll do the prayer for the flourishing of Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings, the Lozang Jedema Shugso. Okay. And I'm going to do this in Tibetan. Jawa malu jebe yaja jan jelse suji jinkan rajan su jewe juzin duje dembi du lozon jewe demba jeju ji nguze wambu doji jengaru danje zena nindo jembo je se zaje jewe ngaju dembe du lozon jewe demba jeju ji Daji zame juba bewe jie dube junde shiga jinwa bu chudan nanjin lunden denbi du lozan jewe denba jijoji dawa nanda jela lidru gomba nanda jimu mumba zan juba nanda jewe gajindru lozan jewe denba jijoji Mandu du ba ja je ze wa ge dun dun ji jin ju la ja we zun gon jan den ju dun du ngu we zan lo zan je we den ba je ju ji zhang e zun ra ma lu ge me du gan za ji gi nyan len dan ba ru Nye ba nye bi nye ju da du da lo zan je we den ba je ju ji Lunju den zunji chenyen dan du be den ba la zun yan len de je jan je jin ru be nan da me du jin lo zan je we den ba je ju ji chi ru nian du ju be ji jin du nan du rin ni ni ju den dan den dong a lan zang ye me zhu zu jie lo zan jie wei dian ba jie zhe jie ju ji de ba xie bei dong ba ni zhe bu da ji zhe bei de jian dan yang zhe ju ben jie ji nin bu ju lo zan jie wei dian bei jie zhe jie jie bu zun ji lang ji sun mei zo niu ze gong dan nan ze lei jin zo Den zhen nan jian jia zi du du ji lo zan jie wei dian ba jie zhe ji duan na be den la me gu ze den ge zhen den din dan be za den gan den be jin da nga dan da wa yi lo zan jie wei dian ba jie zhe ji. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Any mistakes that I've made, I apologize. May they be purified by this Vajrasattva mantra, by imagining Vajrasattva is inseparable from your root teacher, your root lama, and imagining that light, rays, and nectars are showering down on you and all sentient beings, white, red, and blue in color, white transforming into white ohms, red transforming into red ahs, blue transforming into blue homes, and purifying yours and all sentient beings' body, speech, and mind, respectively in those colors. Om, ah, om. Om benzo zata zamaya manubalaya benzo zata zeno bajija dida me baba zudogaya me baba zubogaya me baba anuradu me baba zavazidi me baraja zavakama suchi me kitam chinam guru hum ha ha ho bhagavan zavata gata benzo mame moka benzo bava mahasamaya sapa ahom be. May all obstacles to being able to receive the Dharma be removed. May you always be protected by Palden Lamo and have all of your fears, all of your sickness, be removed and be able to achieve liberation and dependence upon Arya Tara. May Palden Lamo always be our protector. Jo Rama, Jo Rama, Jo Jo Rama, Jinja Galarajamo Rama, Jada Jinja Rudong Johong, Jo Rama, Jo Rama, Jo Jo Rama, Jinja Galarajamo Rama, Jada Jinja Rudong Johong, Jo Rama, Jo Rama, Jo Rama, Jinja Galarajamo Rama, Jada Jinja Rudong Johong, Jo Rama, Jo Rama, Jo Rama, Jinja Galarajamo Rama, Jada Jinja Rudong Johong, Jo Rama, Jo Rama, Jo Rama, Jinja Galarajamo Rama, Jada Jinja Rudong Johong, Jo Rama, Jo Rama, Jo Rama, Jinja Galarajamo Rama, Jada Jinja Rudong Johong, Jo Rama, Jo Rama, Jo Rama, Jinja Galarajamo Rama, Jada Jinja Jo Rama, Jo Rama, Jo Jo Rama, Jinja Galarajamo Rama, Jada Jinja Rudong Jo. Oh. May all obstacles be removed from your lives. Om Vajrapani Hari Griva Garuda Om Ve. So anybody who's new or doesn't know, this is the Torma, the front generation form of white Tara that Rinpoche always used, decades, to give white Tara initiations. So this is very, very blessed, very wonderful. And this text is the Three Wrathful Protectors text, the Vajrapani Haryagriva Garuda text that we took the initiation from Rinpoche of. Very powerful initiation. I thought if we were going to have a tornado, maybe, or if we were going to lose power, I went in Rinpoche's room and brought the Vajrapani Haryagriva Garuda text in. So I have that here. It's been in front of me the whole time, so it worked. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well. With whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the three times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. Prayer for the long life of His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, the embodiment of Chen Rezig right here in our world, walking around with us in the Pure Land, surrounded by snowy mountains. You are the source of all benefit and happiness, all powerful Avalokiteshvara. Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. And now we'll pray the prayer of supplication for Rinpoche. And I apologize for the massive amount of information on emptiness, but it's just, I think it's so important. And it's so great to be able to get excited about emptiness and see that it's not just some simple syllogism. It's something that really starts to unravel the exaggeration of things that causes all of the problems. And it starts to see how everyone else's exaggeration is causing them so much pain. So it's so important to understand what emptiness is. And it takes a lot of words to arrive at what Chandrakirti says, the yogis dwell in non-discursiveness. But we have to deal with conception and analysis to get to a state of inference, to be able to actually have that space-like meditation where we see ultimate truth, the absence of inherent existence directly. We have to analyze and see correct signs to establish what that is conceptually before we ever have a shot of calming our mind down enough and pointing it at that thing. So we really have to know what that thing is. And Rinpoche always encouraged us to keep looking, encouraged me to keep looking. And then right at the end of his life, threw a bombshell in my lap and told me to start studying Jayan Sheba, which go take a look at some of Jayan Sheba's texts, and then you'll start laughing with me because it's so complex, but so beautifully translated by Jeffrey Hopkins, strangely enough, that we now have this connection to be able to study them with the person who's translated all of them. And this is how we have these incredible connections we have to rejoice in and know that this all isn't just some random mistake. We've created the causes previously to connect with this Dharma, and it's here. And let's not say, well, it wasn't my karma to keep going. You know, there's a part in that where you are going to choose to shift it, how you're going to shift it. The complex yogi poses as a simple monk. This was written on, finished March 6, 2023, 1 year after Rinpoche's passing, but it began right when I picked Rinpoche up. I started writing this as a long life prayer, and then it transformed into supplication prayer. Complex yogi poses as a simple monk. Homage to Khenso Geshe Wandak Rinpoche, our precious spiritual friend who is inseparable from Arya Tara. I fully prostrate, covering as many atoms of the earth as possible to your pure body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities. I offer to you drinking water, bathing water, flowers, incense, candles, scented water, food, and music purified by Om Ahom. The rarity of having 1 million wish-fulfilling gems is a common occurrence compared to meeting with a holy teacher like you, who placed the complete path to Buddhahood in our childlike hands. Just like Atisha, who came to Tibet with a lamp to dispel the darkness of ignorance, you, kind abbot, arrived in the West with a lineage purer than a diamond and begged us never to be satisfied with partial instructions. The teachings of the extensive deeds and profound view lineages flowed from your lips like nectar from our ears that elucidated the teachings for beings of 3 capacities. Now that sound has stopped. All composite things are impermanent. You told us that all of your teachers passed away and understood this sadness, entreating us to continue our studies. The Buddha does not wash away the negativities of beings, nor does he remove their miseries by his hands. His spiritual realizations are not transferred to them. It is by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. We are not prepared to take this difficult journey to the highest goodness of Buddhahood without your continued guidance. The sadness in our hearts would be too overwhelming. May you swiftly return to this world and take care of us in all of our lives, wherever we may be, never leaving our hearts and crowns. May all sentient beings perfectly realize renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness, so they know who you really are. Thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate seeing all of you. It's great to keep it going, to keep the Dharma going and keep the teachings on the Great Treatise on the Stage of the Path going. So this Thursday, I know I threatened that we were maybe going to not do classes on Thursdays for a bit. But this Thursday, we're going to keep going. The point of this is we're going to keep going for now, because I still have to finish a section on what the 3 moralities are. When we look at the source of all my good, it says, if I'm not well trained in the 3 moralities, I cannot become a Buddha. Those 3 moralities we've gone through pretty clearly in terms of the 3, what they are. And the 8 divisions of the 2nd morality, and now the 11 divisions we have to go through of the 3rd morality. So if anyone is interested in learning what those are, or how you would do what how you would engage in those things that you have to if you want to become a Buddha, because you can't if you don't, tune in Thursday night, because we are going over them and showing how we practically apply these 3 moralities right now before we're bodhisattvas, and by doing so, that makes us into bodhisattvas. So 7 p.m. Again, it's only an hour and a half. It's 7 to 8:30 on Thursday nights. Okay. Thanks, everybody. See you next time. Practice these things. They work. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.